Well, hello there. You might be asking yourself, why is this guy using the same bit as he did in his last video, the Pokemon Sword and Shield review on the Nintendo Switch? Click here. It's because we have a really low budget this time. So with that said, let's get right on to my hot take on what constitutes an S-rank game for a Nintendo Switch game. Now, before I can give a definitive answer to the title of this video, we must have a discussion on what I like to call benchmark Nintendo Switch games. These games are essentially the required tool we use to rate other games on the tier list. Without these benchmark games, we would basically be rating these games on subjective things such as feelings and opinions. Now, reviews definitely have subjective content in there. At least I firmly believe they should. We aren't robots. We have different opinions and feelings towards certain games that others might feel differently about, and that's perfectly okay. But there has to be some sort of mathematical or scientific reason if you're going to rate a game on a scale. The whole topic of benchmark games is pretty much derived from a legal term that I want to introduce called precedence. Precedence in legal terms is a legal case that establishes a principle or a rule. Basically, when a court hands down a verdict, that verdict is and should be very inspired by past cases in court, aka precedents. This is the bread and butter of why you hire attorneys. They do the long dirty work of finding precedents in the whole history of court to find you the best case scenario. Yeah, I bet you didn't know where that saying came from, did you? I actually don't know, but it makes sense. Okay, great. So as you can see, this will basically be the premise of these benchmark Switch games that we will talk about and use to cement our conversation on what constitutes as an S rank. Alright, so now for the obvious. If you've seen my first two reviews on the channel, then you definitely have heard me use these two games as examples on the tier list. And those two games are none other than Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. As I'm writing this script, I just realized I'm pretty much going to have to give you a mini review on each of these games, so ayo, 2 more reviews coming at you. Let's take a look at Breath of the Wild and see why it is an S-rank game. First off, Breath of the Wild literally breathed new life into the franchise, pun absolutely intended. The series did take many jumps in trying new things pre-Breath of the Wild, however there really was this huge jump into something so entirely new. And of course you know exactly what I'm talking about, the true open world aspect of being able to go to any point on the map from square one after you get the paraglider, of course. It was just jaw-dropping awesome. Making the jump to this point from being restricted to a certain line of play truly deserves such a massive applause. All of the visuals were spot on. Everything looked incredibly gorgeous, from the textures on every single item to the view of Hyrule Field itself. I just couldn't take my eyes off this masterpiece of graphic design. The music might have been lacking due to what we've come to experience from previous titles, but I think that the ambient music really fits the tone, and when things get intense, the music does pick up, so you know what, it fits. As a standalone game, the story wasn't that great, but just as last year in 2019 we were told of a sequel, perhaps a prequel, we don't really know at this point, is in the works, so we know that the story will be expanded upon in Breath of the Wild 2. Knowing this, I think the story was pretty great at what it did, and I can't wait to see how Breath of the Wild 2 answers the questions that Breath of the Wild 1 presented in its story. Now let's talk content. Yes, what many reviewers such as myself like to beat over the head of the viewer, quote, does this game constitute a $60 price tag, question mark, end quote. It's a fair question. We all want to know whether we want to spend a good chunk of our paycheck on blank game. However, this question I'm afraid falls more onto the side of subjectivity. It's more of an opinionated question if you think about it. Now I'm sure 99% of Switch owners would say, heck yes, Breath of the Wild is way worth the $60. Heck, some might even say it's worth more than that. However, what really dictates the answer to that question? Is it content? Yeah, Breath of the Wild had tons of content, 40 plus hours in fact for myself. But perhaps others finished the game in half the time because they wanted to blaze right through it. So if people are judging on hours of content, then would those people say it's not worth the $60? Well, here's my spicy take on this question. I don't think it has to do with content or anything like that. No, it's quite more simple. It all comes down to fun. That's right. Did you have fun throughout your experience with the game or not? Because folks, at the end of the day, what is it we are talking about here? We are talking about games. Games. They're meant to provide fun entertainment for the masses, both new and old. At least they should be. Here's a really good quote I like from the previous Nintendo of America president, Reggie.
The game is fun. The game is a battle. If it's not fun, why bother? Fun and battle always locked together. It's not just where you can take your game. It's where your game can take you.
Now, of course, this was used in tangent with the marketing during E3 in 2017, with buzzwords such as Odyssey marketing Super Mario Odyssey, but the idea here is still painted very nicely. If the game isn't fun, why bother? If I can drive home any main point to any of you, it's that if a game is fun for you, don't worry how any other people rate it, because they just didn't have as much fun as you did with that game. So for me, when I write up a review, I start with the basics. Was the game fun? And for the most part, I'm pretty much able to find some sort of enjoyment out of a game. There are times where I pick up a game and go, wow, how did this make it through all stages of development? But as of late, Nintendo hasn't done that for me in quite a while. But getting back on track with Breath of the Wild, the game was super fun. The visuals were stunning, the game introduced such an awesome new take on the franchise, and the story was great for a part 1. And very importantly, it kept me coming back for more and more. So now let's take a look at Super Mario Odyssey. At first you might be thinking to yourself, well, these are going to be very similar points as addressed for Breath of the Wild. However, they have quite different reasons for being S-tier games than you'd think. While Breath of the Wild kept us super entertained for a fresh take on an open world aspect, Super Mario Odyssey kept the same general formula of going from world to world, getting moon to moon, all the way to the final boss. There was no option to go to any world you wanted. You had to go in a linear line with a minor exception or two along the way. In each world, sure, you had free reign to explore anywhere you wanted from spawning, but what I'm getting at is you weren't able to get to the final boss from square one as you could in Breath of the Wild. And that's perfectly fine. This game would be pretty weird if that were the case. No, what Super Mario Odyssey does differently, and does better in my opinion, is building memorable experiences. See, I think in Breath of the Wild, we remember how fun it was to play it and explore the world. But in Super Mario Odyssey, I remember the worlds and themes presented throughout each of the worlds. I remember the quirky characters, the abstract ideas, and the excitement I'd get in capturing every single enemy for the very first time. These memories are ones I like to call nostalgia memories. Just like when we were younger, we had these and still have these memories of games. Super Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Super Mario World. I'm seeing a pattern here, and yeah, I think I touched on this in my Luigi's Mansion 3 review, but it seems I'm a huge fan of theming in video games. For me, the theming is the crux for what build these nostalgia memories. So yeah, Super Mario Odyssey built these memories in my head that will forever be nostalgic. But is nostalgia what makes an S-rank game?
Absolutely not.
Now, just like what we were talking about in the first half of this video, Breath of the Wild is considered an S-rank game, but not once did I talk about nostalgia. So what is it then, NintenBro? I've listened to you ramble on and you still haven't given me an answer as to what makes an S-ranked game. Well, my dear 𝐴𝐽𝐽𝐾𝐽, we've got to the end of the video and I'm now ready to summarize and give you that answer you've all been dying to hear. An S-ranked game for me has to be super fun in some sort of fashion. It needs to be able to pull me back in again and again, time after time, and it literally has to make making videos a pain in my rear end because I just want to get back into playing the game. It has to look great. Not the best I've ever seen per se, but it has to look really good. And one final thing I've noticed while writing this script, a game that is an S-ranked game will seamlessly have so much to talk about. Literally, if you sat down with one of your best buds, could you talk about the game for hours? If yes, that's a pretty big indicator that the game could be a potential S-ranked game in your books. Now yes, you can talk about bad stuff for hours as well, but I'm talking positive here, folks.
Well, folks, I hope I was able to shed some light on how I rate games the way I do. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button and that bell for future video notifications, and tell me in the comments future videos you'd like to see on the channel. Don't forget to smash that like button. Until next time, see ya!